Welcome to episode 61 of Mitolife Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn. Today, I'm speaking with Sumair Bhasin of TrainLifeFit. Sumair's been my friend for about 5 or 6 years now, and we've both gone through phases and learned we were wrong and changed our mind multiple times. And I think that's what strengthened our friendship and our trust to see each other doing that. And so we actually discussed that in this interview, and he's in a different kind of realm of health than I am. He's in the movement, stretching, and conditioning kind of world, where I'm more focused on the brain and kind of detoxification at a very deep level and longevity and things like that. And I know it all connects, which is why I wanted to have Sumair on the show. And he actually gives some really great analogies that are really easy to understand about the human body in this interview. And we talk about functional patterns and the whole biomechanics movement. And we talk about strength, stretching, trigger pointing. There's actually an interesting Q&A at the end, questions that my friends sent in to ask him. We even talk about cold thermogenesis and why that might not be the best thing for your health. And we also talk about massage. So Sumair created a gym called TrainLifeFit that's located in Austin, Texas. They provide personal training, group fitness, even nutrition coaching, and online training if you really gravitate towards his work and style of doing things. I think he's very holistic in his approach and very balanced. I don't sense extremism in Sumair, which is refreshing because extremism is definitely trending right now. People either going full carnivore or vegan or just being really extreme, anti this or anti that all the time. And I always talk about context and how certain things might be good for us at a certain time, but not all the time, right? Or things that used to be good for us aren't good for us anymore, like natural spring water because of acid rain and the high amounts of iron in that water. So whether you're a gym junkie, obsessed with stretching and massage and biomechanics, whatever your deal is, you will get something out of this interview because we talk about it all. And we even talk about nutrition a little bit, and he picks my brain on omega-3s and some other things. And it's just a really fun, informative talk. And he's just a humble dude. Sumair is a really awesome guy, and I'm grateful to be his friend. And I think he's also a wealth of experiential knowledge, which is rare. A lot of people just go off studies nowadays, and he is one of those like me that actually wants to experiment on himself and find out what works, which is pretty cool. So here's Sumair Bhasin. Enjoy. All right, I'm here with Sumair Bhasin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We had some technical issues, but we worked through it, and we've been friends for a while. I'm pretty sure we met through the Rabras, and then you were following my stuff for a while, and I was living in the RV down in South San Diego, a not so nice part of town. And I remember being outside because I was obsessed with the sun, and I was shirtless, barefoot. You know, I was going all the way with that quantum health thing. I was like all the way in it. And I had my headset on, an AirTube headset, and you were recording me for your podcast. But since then, I think as we've spoken, my views have 180'd. So it's been kind of a fun journey for both of us because you've gone through that as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man. Actually, I think we never officially met in person, but we've been connected to the Rabras. But I think I was trying to make it out to where you were at one point, but I just couldn't make it out. But yeah, I would love to actually meet in person someday.
That'd be cool. I'll come to your gym. Yeah, I like Austin. I went there for the paleo conference, and Besides the
I love
blistering
it.
heat, I like the cold better. But I had the best
Yeah,
burger I've
fair.
ever had in my life. It was like I forget. It was like a
Yeah,
burger
man.
stand. I can't remember the name, but it was like $12. It was like double patty, and I was like, wow, I feel
I bet
amazing after this.
it was probably Hop Dotty.
Yep, I think that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, high quality burgers. Yeah, cool, man.
Yeah, I travel for the food. That's one of my biggest. But a healthier Anthony Bourdain.
Oh yeah,
Less crazy.
absolutely.
But
Hmm.
but yeah, we've both had a journey. I mean, you've how long have you been into fitness and physical health and exercise and
I would say ever since I can remember, probably when I was 8 years old, my brother and I would obsessively watch Michael Jordan videos and Michael Jackson videos over and over. And at the time, we just wanted to understand why it was so seamless for these two individuals to just do what they were doing. Like, how can Michael Jordan fly from the free throw line? How did Michael Jackson like moonwalk so effortlessly? And we would obsess over it, like why can they do that? And so we would try to understand movement from a very young age, and we would sit down and just try to draw it out, like draw still frames of Jordan, draw still frames of Jackson, over and over and over until we started to see patterns. And we're like, okay, so they're doing something happens somewhere in their torso before their limbs do something. We kept seeing that really early. My brother was a bit of a savant. Like he just knew things really fast. He had the beautiful gift to be able to see that. I was kind of the oblivious, like I was going around with whatever Big Brother is doing kind of guy. And the more and more I spent time with my brother, the more I picked up on what he was seeing. I was like, oh, he's just looking for two or three patterns over and over. Once he sees it, he then learns to synthesize new ways of doing it. And so it started when I was young, man, and it's been a beautiful journey. It's always starts off with athletics or even aesthetics, and then it moves more into function, which is where I'm at now. Yeah.
that's really interesting. Yeah, I had a friend that was really into Weird Al Yankovic, so we would watch all his music videos.
Heck yeah.
I think he was moving a little different though. It wasn't as smooth.
Oh yeah, he was super funky.
That's funny. Yeah, I was into um, action movies, and I got like a little handheld small camcorder and a
Oh
digital
yeah, yeah.
camcorder, and my friends and I would film action movies just in the neighborhood and in my backyard that I grew up in. And one time I dressed up as Superman and I jumped off the roof. Like we literally did like 10 takes, and this is like pretty far. And a couple months later, I found the ligament in my knee was torn, and so I had to wear a
Oh
cast for a
crap.
few months.
Dang.
So yeah,
Wow.
I know actors and stunt people probably get hit pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, I used to watch Jackie Chan a lot too, because that dude would just do his own stunts, and they're just like, what? No, and he would get hurt so much, but he developed the skill to be able to see whether a stunt guy would make a stunt or not. So they had him on a show. They're like, they'll pause the stunt before it's over. It's like, do you think he'll make that stunt? He's like, no, he won't make it. And every time he was correct because he could see like the angle was off. He wasn't rotating enough. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I used to watch Jackie Chan a lot as well.
That's funny. That's really cool. So you said you moved from aesthetics to more functionality. So what does that mean? Like aesthetics is just looking good, and then functionality is actually functioning well.
Yeah, along the lines of what Matt does too, and I really have admired Matt through his journey because he's in the arena versus just giving you recycled advice, which is often the case. If you look at these memes, it's like, oh, eat these two dates and you'll kill intestinal worms, and it's like, what? And instead of that, Matt was trying everything. Trying veganism, trying, um, you know, being a sun warrior, all sorts of stuff, eating fish, and I really admired that about him. And I was very much, I would say, alike in that regard where I tried every single kind of movement pattern I could think of. I've tried bodybuilding, which is purely like how you look. I've done that for a while. I've done powerlifting. I've done strongman, where you just lift heavy stones and toss tires and do crazy shit like that. I've done heavy basketball training, more athletic work. I've done your functional training stuff too, your Bosu balls and all that. And I began, just like my brother and I would, as a young kid, I just saw patterns, and the more people got very dogmatic about their opinions, the more I ran the other way. Kind of like how Matt has done himself, and always searching for the truth. So for me, whenever someone comes out with a very hard-nosed opinion, I always question, and not from like being an asshole or being trying to just be facetious for the sake of it, but really to test and then retest. Does it actually work for this individual or that individual? Is it context based? So it shifted because I started to hurt myself so much through strongman, through powerlifting, where I was pulling like 450, 500 off the ground. I was lifting heavy stones, flipping 300-pound tires, and as crazy and as invigorating as that was, it was primarily, I would say, ego. It was just like, I want to fulfill this thing that would be nice to look at on Instagram or Facebook, and I'll honor that. That's the truth. And same with bodybuilding. I want people to admire my physique, but it wasn't because I was obsessed like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was just because I wanted the validation from everyone else. But the more I did that, the more I got hurt. And I'm just like, why am I doing this to my body? Like, I can't do the things I love. I can't play basketball. I can't dance. I can't do the things that I used to love doing as a kid. And I just lost that. I'm not functional. I feel terrible in the morning. So I moved away from just trying to look good. And looking good doesn't have to just be how you look on the outside, but it was even just how you lifted weights. What's the typical movie montage BS you see, like the movie montage of slamming a tire and flipping something. All of a sudden, you're a martial artist. I'm like, how did that even happen, right? How did you become a martial artist from flipping tires and maybe punching a bag a few times? Mm-hmm. So I just saw this disconnect, and I was just like, okay, let's move to something that's actually valuable for people long term and makes a true difference, because powerlifting might last for about 3 or 4 or 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and then kaput, you're done. Strongman, same thing, unless you did something different. So I began to look at the joints very differently, I would say.
That's awesome. Yeah, because your website, TrainLifeFit, is pretty cool. I think at some point you say not your average gym, because I remember growing up, this is horrible, but I read the book like Vegan Bodybuilding, and I just thought that veganism was the way. And I was vegetarian for like 8 years, and I was going to Gold's Gym and 24-hour fitness, and pretty rigorously. I grew up with a friend that was a little more bulky, and just, I think he could build muscle easier than I could. And we would go like 4 to 5 days a week, and I wouldn't see really any results. Like, I could up the weight slightly, but I think my nutrition was off. And, it was like, I think one day we do back and biceps, and then chest and triceps, and then, do that again. It was like the old school kind of workout. Absolutely. But it's very isolationist, right, in its approach.
Very much so. And I think there's a time and place for it. And here's the thing where the functional patterns folks might come and yell at me, but but I'm cool with it. I love the functional patterns folks. I love what they're trying to do. I think it's important work. But I think isolation work has its place. And I think it often is overused and overutilized in this current state of being. Matt talks a lot about calcification of tissues, if that's correct. Am I right in that? Talking about calcification? Yep. Talks about, and I think of that the same way with movement too. When you're moving, it's very important. I definitely adhere to some of Matt's guidelines with food, because if you're moving, first look at what you're consuming, what you're drinking, and that just goes. I mean, that's even light too. Everything. When you can sort that out, your lymphatic system works better, and in terms of movement, it's heavily tied to your lymphatic system. So if you're not doing that first step, you're going to be already stifled in the way you move. So I would say that yes, isolation work can lead to more calcification if done over and over and over. Because you're just building so much waste product in that one angle. And if you're already inflamed, which I bet 95% of us, all of us freaking are, then I bet you're going to keep causing more and more issues to the point where your tendons get brittle, your ligaments get weak, and what often happens is you end up snapping your stuff up. So yeah, I think there's this idea of kinetic chains, which you may have heard Naughty talk about a lot, but kinetic chains have been around for years. So when someone touts that they're the founder of it all, it's just that they've learned to actually synthesize it really well, and that's what I respect about him. That he synthesized information really well, and I respect that. But there's this idea of kinetic chains, and all it is that you have fascia that has a specific purpose, and it travels in specific lines. And these lines, their job is to connect a subset of muscles to each other. So for example, you have a line that goes from your left shoulder, a fascia or connective tissue, it goes from your left shoulder all the way to your right hip, all the way down to your foot. And its job, it's implicit in the way it travels, its job is to help you rotate your body because it's a cross pattern line. So normal gait patterns happen because those subset of muscles are connected in a specific way. You have lines of fascia that go from the back of your neck all the way down your back to your heels. Its job is to extend your body. And so that you have to think the back of your neck, your middle back, your rhomboids, your rector spinae, your glutes, and your hams are all one chain. It's why when we extend back, if you're cognizant enough and you squeeze your glutes underneath you, all of a sudden your back straightens up even more. It's like, well, why did that happen? It's like, well, that has a chain that you're actually learning to fire together. Now, when people can shift towards training the chains and tensioning those chains, specifically in different angles, rotation, cross-patterning, push-pull, then you can see some really interesting things happen. You're probably going to shake like a mofo in the beginning because you're not used to it. You've lost that basic process. But B, when you start training that way, movement becomes a little more fluid. Like the whole Michael Jackson Jordan thing that was so hard to debunk becomes a little more simple. It's like, oh, okay, well, I know that this chain connects the lat to the oblique, and that's important in turning. Okay, that's why this athlete's so freaking fast, because they can turn. If they can't turn, they're rigid, they're just going to be a robot, right? So yeah, man. When you talked about bodybuilding and it being purely isolation and aesthetics, I think as of right now, I would recommend and suggest people move more towards using their kinetic chains and then using bodybuilding as an adjunct to maybe just help out the areas that are still weak or lagging. So yeah,
that's super cool. Yeah, that was a super articulate explanation, and that makes total sense. Have you seen the machine that Naughty made that's like a tower and then you could pull like kind of the rope thing?
The rope thing. I know
I'm trying to
about
think of the name for
decompression
it.
machine. You mean like the cable thing that you can pull?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I've seen that machine. It's pretty cool. I think he's onto something there, and he found a creative way to add a very specific load. Now, the thing with I think I look at his work too, and it's reminiscent of Paul Chek, and some of the stuff that Paul Chek has done is reminiscent of some other people back in the 1970s and 60s as well. Your Eugene Sandow, some of your founders of in strength, were doing some weird stuff like that, like pulling horses laterally and doing this weird, interesting motions that were fascinating. So I even started to mimic some of that work probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I was like, this feels, when I do this work and then I go back to a barbell movement, the barbell movement's easier. That's weird. Like this barbell thing feels like a joke when I did this kind of cross pattern thing. And then I got hooked onto Anatomy Trains, which is a book written by Thomas Myers, who is often written off as a quack or written off as a crazy dude. But in all honesty, I ended up taking a cadaver course. I was like, let me see for myself. I want to see what the heck is going on inside the body. So I look at these cadavers. I'm like, dude, it's right freaking here. There are these weird lines that are happening in the body. It's in medicine, but it's not being talked about. Even the way the intestines are joined, even the way like the organs are joined up. It's really interesting, and it makes sense. Like movement even helps the way your body digests food. And if you're eating a bunch of PUFA, as Matt talks about a lot, you can bet all that fascial tissue around your core is pressed down, which makes your lower back harder to extend. And most people are like, I don't know why my lower back's always tight. It's like, well, maybe it's beyond movement. It's also the way you're eating. So yeah, I mean, I think Nadi's done some pretty cool stuff, bringing back some movement in a very creative way that helps people connect faster. And I think that's. I'll leave it. I'll say this one statement, and then you feel free to hop on that. But the statement is that people have moved away, and I think they're moving back to it. Moved away from learning how to create internal tension to augment movement. So, for example, if you're sitting there right now, I want you to take your belly button right now with me, and I want you to draw it up towards your ribs, and tell me what your mid back and lats feel like they're doing.
Kind of bow out.
Cool. So when you feel that bow out, now I want you to take your shoulder blades and just depress them down away from your ears, and then keep pulling that belly button harder and wrap it around towards your side. So it would look like pulling it around to your obliques and then pulling it up to your lats. Let me know if you feel your obliques and lats fire together.
Yeah. Wow. Mm-hmm.
And now keep taking that up towards the back of your head. Now imagine trying to move somebody or an item with this amount of strength and tension. Different game, right?
Yeah.
So that's just like a simple exercise. Imagine doing that standing. Imagine doing that while you're trying to push somebody, pull somebody. I've watched you chop wood. Imagine doing that while you chop wood. Like, oh my God. Like it just feels like a fluid, whoosh, because now you're connecting things from a very deep place. And that's where I feel like people are moving away from, or moving toward rather. And they lost that for a while. They were just like, they would shout out positional cues. Get your knees behind your toes. Drop your hips. Sit your butt back. And it's like, what does that mean to the body? Like, do we actually know that? So yeah, that's something that's important I want to put out there.
That's really cool. Yeah, and we talked about Bruce Lee, and I spoke with a body worker a few weeks ago, and he made an interesting point about gorillas or orangutans, on how their strength largely comes from their flexibility, and that was interesting. Like you said, like
100%.
You know, a chimpanzee or whatever can rip your arm off without even thinking about it. Super easy.
Oh my God, yeah. and you know, that concept for people that are listening right now, the concept of flexibility and mobility, people come up with all these terms to label what strength means to them, and it's still being studied. However, one concept that resonates with me is this: you take a tissue, and unless you're Bruce Lee, you can master the 1-inch punch, which is like amazing. Most people, if you think of you trying to punch someone with only 5 degrees of motion in your shoulder, how much force would you actually be able to produce to move that person? Probably not very much, because the mass and the acceleration, or the mass that's coming through, is not very much, because you can't move the mass. Now, imagine having 50 degrees of motion in the shoulder, and then being able to wind that up and then punch through. Now, that amount of mass coming at you at a faster speed is going to pack a punch and tear you apart, like that chimpanzee or that gorilla, because they can take their limbs through a deeper range. So that's one simple concept. However, that's still too simplistic. And the reason why is that shoulder in isolation is not the thing that's ripping your face apart, or not ripping you in two. What's ripping you in two is the ability for that gorilla to be able to wind up and get a full range of motion back here, but the spine, and how the spine's relating to the shoulder, how the hip is relating to the shoulder, how all those joints are relating to each other, if they're all mobile in a chain, like we talked about kinetic chains, that's going to pack a ridiculous punch, because that gorilla is not just mobile at the shoulder, he's mobile at the hip, the glute, the legs, and then bam, you're knocked out. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
I could go back in time and do that to the people that discovered PUFAs.
And guys, actually, Matt, when Matt is joking about that, and probably partially also true, but when he says that, like, I do want to say this about nutrition, like, it will freaking change the game completely in movement. And the parallels, or not even the parallels, the direct impact it has on your ability to engage and have internal awareness is beyond. And we can get into yoga in a second too. Like, yoga is a lot about like going inward, but it's not tangible for a lot of people. And it's not tangible because their insides are literally not being fueled properly. And for a lot of people, I notice they'll, in the yoga community, they'll go vegan, vegetarian, and break their bodies apart. Uh, and they'll put themselves in the most intense poses without knowing what to feel. And then on top of that, having calcified tissue from improper uh, ingestion of the right foods, right water, drinking too much spring water, all sorts of stuff, and it wrecks them, man. So yeah, I mean, as Matt is joking about that, man, like, there's so much truth towards movement. I just cannot even emphasize that more. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, so at TrainLifeFit, you guys offer kind of nutritional consulting, right? Like when you work with clients, like you'll kind of assess how they're eating and their past.
Honestly, Matt, like, just like you have gone through your journey of nutrition, like when coaching with us has changed so much. Like, in the beginning, it was like I was following a lot of John Berardi's work, who was a PhD at UT, and he would just talk about eating like a palm size of meat, and then a thumb size of fat, and like a fist size of vegetables, and that was like his way of helping you portion things. And it was a lot about macros, and that's how we were coaching a lot of our nutrition. And we thought we were holistic because we were teaching habit-based nutrition. However, I felt so misaligned with that. And the reason why I felt misaligned is because I was doing something totally different and I was not following that. I was going more from a health-based perspective. I was like, well, I know these foods are going to help me feel more functional, period. And that felt aligned because I was teaching functional work. So I was like, why would I teach this weird robotic, like, bodybuilding style macro, 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 macro when the body doesn't work quite that way? It's too complex for me to dishonor it like that. And so we kind of shifted away from that, man. We moved away from that kind of nutrition. And at this point, we discontinue that program because we're refining it. And I'm actually coaching a bit under the table to see how a lot of the Ray Peat's work and a lot of what's coming out now, even in studies, are supporting people with their thyroid. It seems to have a lot of impact on people. And man, I cannot tell you, I'm training a client in the Netherlands right now with her movement and her food, and it's changing the game. And the good thing is about in the Netherlands is they have pretty high quality food, high quality dairy, high quality meat. So for her, when I said that to her, she's like, yeah, we have awesome farms out here. So she even took me through a little tour on her camera. And I was like, that's cool. And then immediately she's like excreting a bunch of gunk out of her system, and she's feeling just super. This is a woman that's in her 50s who's feeling peri-menopausal, and then the symptoms are starting to go away. So anywho, yeah, that's changed a lot, man. Changed drastically.
That's really cool. Yeah, that shows your just openness, and those are the people that I like being friends with and following, or people that are open to changing and aren't going to write a book and then get so attached to it that they can't change. So
oh my god, yeah. Like,
yeah,
their whole life like reside, like, almost is writing on that book and having talks to give on that book. I have a lot of friends that have had like that, and they disagree with a lot of things that I do, or even when I show them your work, it's like, this guy's freaking nuts. But I'm like, that's probably a good thing, because oftentimes the clients that have even shown your work to, oftentimes they'll say, I'll be candid with you. They'll be like, that guy's fucking nuts. And I'm like, keep watching. Just keep watching. He has very powerful statements, and because he does, I find it fascinating, and they'll keep watching, and they'll start trying things, but they won't comment or say anything. They'll just start trying things. Man, I kind of felt better. I kind of felt better when I did that. I thought dairy would mess me up, but now, I'm slowly introducing it back. I feel better. There's like little things like that that just crack me up, man. Like the people, they're so resistant to people that have this open way of thinking, but yet they will try things and have a disconfirming experience. So anyway, I just thought that was fascinating.
That's hilarious. No, that's good. Yeah, I'm very outspoken, and some people think I'm abrasive, and sometimes I get conspiratorial. Like last night, I just shared about the Lifeboat Foundation, and the connection with Jeffrey Epstein, and the connection with Kobe, and like he invested $100 million into this Epstein Foundation, and they're into space colonies and biotech and transhumanist, literally. So, yeah, I think me bringing that stuff up can trigger some people too, because a lot of people are emotionally attached to celebrities, and they're not willing to entertain that they could be, on the dark side.
Okay, with the transhuman part, I wanted to ask you this question now. I'm curious. So, with the because I have my own views on transhumanism and how it would impact the movement world, your health, all sorts of stuff. But when it comes to transhumanism, what are some of your big thoughts / qualms with it? Yeah, I'm just curious.
Well, I attended a transhumanist rally years ago in San Diego, and I met the president. His name Johan or something. I actually had dinner with him. He was running for president under the transhumanist party, and so I sat down to dinner with a bunch of these folks and picked their brain. And a lot of them are into bionic organs. A lot of them are into switching out. When the organ fails, they'll put in a robotic heart, robotic lung, liver, even a brain. I don't know if that's possible. Even mind uploading is talked about right now, where you can upload your consciousness into like a cloud, to where you attain some type of immortality. I'm really interested in extreme longevity, like a really, really, really long time naturally. And I think that's possible. And I think that, God gave us these specific bodies with these parts for a reason. And so it's dishonoring him to switch parts out. And I think we can maintain, this vehicle a lot better and a lot easier and a lot longer than people say.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned it that way, because I'm of the conviction that you can definitely have better longevity if you just learn a bit more about some of the laws of nature, some of the laws of physiology, some of the laws of anatomy, laws of biochemistry, and not as it is often handed to you in textbooks, but actually as it is presented moreover from an empirical view, where you're studying and testing, and then analyze it. Yeah. I think that is from my perspective, a powerful way of looking at it, but not getting overhooked, like you said, to celebrities, because celebrities will tout things like Gwyneth Paltrow, who starts talking about taking these weird dust stuff, like this weird powdered dust that she's created from weird herbs, and saying that's the truth to being skinny, and promoting skinny teas and things of that nature, or promoting like even the cold shower folks, man. Like it does irk me a lot, because they get hooked on this idea that the cold shower or the cold bath is going to resolve all of their systemic issues. And they'll be like, and then they'll get kind of like on this cool train of like, look how cool I am. I'm able to handle the cold. And I get concerned myself, because just from knowing movement, how it's connected to nutrition, just from a movement perspective, that can be often very harmful. Not only because of the pure like, if you're already stressed, you're going to get more stress kind of perspective, but moreover than that, at the end of the day, the body is craving more blood flow to those very calcified tissues. It's also wanting and desiring better integrity within both your fascial tissue and your muscle tissue. If you're applying a cold to your body, what that's telling it is to retard blood flow and to retard those things from moving in the right way. And yeah, let's talk about the post lymph, right after you're done with the cold shower, lymph will move better and so on and so forth. But if you're already in a stress state internally, your muscle tissues and your fascia are also going to be in a similar state. How do you expect yourself to move better long term when you're just numbing everything? So yeah.
That was an awesome point. I think you remember when I was in the RV, I had that cold tub set up, and I would do naked, grounded baths in that tub at noonday sun and do the whole deal, and even pregame with different things. And I think my biggest benefit from that was definitely in the brain, because I was eating oysters. So I was getting not omega-3s, but the copper in the oysters. And I was getting, I was eating a lot of red meat, grass-fed beef. So I was getting my protein, I was getting my copper, and I pretty much never took a day off Shilajit. And so I feel like I got mostly a brain benefit. Like I would get this high that would last 5 hours, in my brain. And I felt like it did protect me from the buzzes of the city, non-native EMF. But that's about it. Yeah, I don't know what it did to my body and as a whole. So.
Yeah. And I honestly wonder too, when would it be appropriate? Like when would your body be able to take that and turn it into a positive adaptation? I don't know yet. And maybe it would change, but my big concern a lot was, well, you're not making this joint move better, man. Like you're just not. And I think it's more of the substitution. Oh, in order to make my back feel better, I'm going to jump at this cold tub. Like, no. Hold on. If you're going to make this lower back feel better, how is it relating to your glutes, your hams? Because it's relational. Let's address the problem. And we address the problem. It's like, oh, that's so much better. Yes, that was tougher, but it's so much better. And it lasts for 5 weeks versus the 2 or 3 hours of high that you got from the cold shower. And most of them weren't doing what you were doing, which was you were preparing a pregame. So I just wonder when that is appropriate.
I love that context kind of mindset. Yeah. And I agree that there is a time and a place for it. But yeah, I like your point about short-term results versus long-term, and everyone's focused on short-term. Like I have the Hyper Ice little pack thing. Yeah. Those are kind of fun. Like you can fill it with the gel, and it's great first aid, because if I break up something or hurt something, it's going to be a while till I can get to a hospital. I have all these first aid things.
Yes.
That's one of them, if I have some pain. But I think the biggest benefit to cold is increasing ATP production. But most people are missing the magnesium piece. Most people are missing the copper piece. And so you're really just spinning your wheels if you're trying to get these engines working without magnesium and copper.
So I'm curious. So for example, if a body, for me, when someone comes to see me, I'm like, okay, I want to get this athlete the ability to change direction really fast and do it over and over in a sport. Maybe he's a football player, he's a soccer player, whatever it is. Which, by the way, like anyone that plays sports, I think is actually one of the most harmful things you can do to your body. In all honesty, just because the sport is so repetitive and it's so specific, and this is just me being real. All the athletes we glorify are doing a lot of damage to their body because they're doing something over and over and over. Like think of a tennis serve. It's the same like rotation hit at that glenohumeral joint over and over. And oftentimes they don't train the other side, which is, I think, frankly, not smart. And a lot of skaters, they go around the track one direction. Why don't most of them train the other direction too? They're going to hyperload one side and mess up their ankle, knees, and hips. So yeah, by the way, like if you're going to be an athlete, just know you better train everything else that you're not looking at, right? But anyway, back to the whole magnesium thing. For me, the question I have for you is, or a thought-provoking concept I have for you is, I wonder just how you look at, okay, well, if you take this, you take Shilajit or this, it improves the absorption of blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just like that, I think about the same thing with the body. And so, for example, if I need to get a joint to move in a range of motion it's not used to because they got surgery at that joint, and after surgery happened, there's scarring, there's all sorts of stuff happening. What would you, from your perspective, from the nutritional perspective, from the overall health perspective, if someone's coming back from a surgery and they want to improve the overall quality of their joints and their health, what would you tell them to do first? I'm curious.
Number one would be take systemic enzymes like nattokinase and serrapeptase, because those will go in and dissolve the scar tissue and the fibrin fairly quickly. Like I've had some crazy testimonials from friends where it's like an overnight reduction in pain.
Oh, wow.
And even an increase overnight in mobility.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I think they're super underrated. The enzyme from the Japanese silkworm, and then the enzyme nattokinase from fermented soybean, and they just keep culturing it. And they're little Pac-Men, and you take them on an empty stomach. I take 3 first thing in the morning. You can take 3 before bed. But yeah, most people don't know about systemic enzyme therapy. Really, any itis or osis, those can tremendously help with. But yeah, that would really speed recovery there. And then the only other thing I would say is a lot of gelatin. Is gelatin in bone broth contains a lot of anti-inflammatory amino acids like glycine, proline, and these amino acids help to balance out a lot of the muscle. A lot of people have a diet high in cysteine and methionine and tryptophan, and these are inflammatory because they're only doing the muscle meats. And so just by adding in homemade gummy bears or homemade gummy squares or bone broth, people can really help. And most people are protein deficient. I would say, I don't know if you've seen that at your gym, but even sedentary people need a lot of protein.
Yeah, man, they're hooked on the whole IF craze right now. So a lot of people that come to my gym like, man, I do IF, and they're very convicted about it, and they're very proud about it. So in the beginning, I would listen to it and be like, okay, cool, you do you, or we'll approach it from the movement side, or we'll approach it the best we can from the movement side, but it just wasn't aligning. So I'm like, if I know you're coming into me after a 14-hour fast, or you're in the midst of your fast, what am I doing during session that's going to make it worse? Can I potentially harm you more by overdoing it? Yes, I can, and I know I can. And so, to your point about bone broth and gelatin, I think that's really important for people to hear. I've always had that hunch to be drinking that every day, to some degree, especially since I'm so active. But also had a hunch for people that are recovering from injuries that would be smart. But it's cool to hear that perspective, because I think if people paired that properly with a specific style of training, so for example, you mentioned gelatin and bone broth from someone that's trying to repair scars or even adhesions or cysts or whatever they have. If you pick certain movements that improve the capacity of that joint specifically. Now, again, the functional patterns folks, they work a lot on kinetic chains. I think that's important. However, sometimes I feel like what's missing, what I've seen from my clients, kinetic chain work works, but it only works if the joint in question is actually able to relate to the other joints. Now, some people might come at me and say, "Oh, just do fast soft tissue work." I'm like, what if you just smash someone to death, like soft tissue work, but they have so many issues around that joint, or they're not nutritionally sound, or they're not internally sound? Could that do more damage? And my feeling is it probably could. If they were already not internally sound with what they're eating, you could potentially cause something to happen in the circulatory system. I don't know what, it's just my hunch. So what I think of doing with my clients first is I do specific isometrics that are very difficult and like challenging, reverse eccentrics, very, very like isolated for some of these people. And then I do a kinetic chain movement right after that's regressed and helps the client able to get into movement. Now, I think what will be a powerful 3-punch would be gelatin, bone broth, isolation work, and then kinetic chain work. That would be like amazing to help someone function to the next level. It's just some thought I had about that.
That's super cool. And I had a question for you. Did you ever play badminton? Because I grew up playing that in the backyard with a I would jump around in the grass and do flips, but I probably caused some injury.
I played a lot of badminton when I was younger. Yeah, a lot.
Okay.
I mean,
what do you think about it? Is it pretty functional?
Man, so I'd say maybe a definition of functional would be important. However, I'd say I played a lot of badminton because in Dubai, UAE, where I grew up, I was born there, and where I grew up, that was a very popular sport, and we would go to town, like just that was one of my favorite. That and cricket were two sports I played a lot, and basketball was my third. But badminton, cricket, basketball, any sport like that, anything that has you unilaterally loaded, like one arm hitting, can almost always, you can guess, cause overuse problems over time, unless your training is full 360. Like you're learning to move in multiple planes of motion. You're maybe switching hands, but also training in such a fashion where you're not avoiding or ignoring movements that are crucial. You're not avoiding chains that are just turned off. So my answer would be, it depends. That's always an answer that people hate, but it depends because I would have to look at your lifestyle even more. And overall, your lifestyle is probably better than 95% of folks out there. You're living in Idaho, and you're blocking yourself from EMFs. You're blocking yourself from a lot of garbage out there. So you're probably in a better state, in a more resilient state to take more of that pattern, that repetitive pattern. However, I would still think, since you're always after longevity and being the best that you can, to think of movement in terms of even patterns you're not getting. So you get some rotation from chopping wood, which is amazing. You rotate, you chop. Most people don't do that. Definitely do both sides, 100%. But also, how often are you loading over your ankle? So how often does your knee go over your ankle? So you might want to think, how can I simulate ways to get my knee over my ankle? How often am I pulling something? It's like, okay, maybe I only pull the door towards me a few times, or I pull something. If you naturally pull hay around, or you pull something around the farm, great. Then pull both sides, use both arms. So you can just think in terms of, what am I not getting, and make it more organic for yourself. And still play your badminton, enjoy it, have a good time, but also just supplement it as you would, as you've even mentioned to me, with food, to make sure the body is moving in the best state it can. Because you have your guys like Ido Portal. You've probably seen his work, I'm assuming, yeah? So Ido is a lot about, like, fluid and Dancy and all this cool, interesting stuff. But then that's great, but how does that apply to a human just trying to live their life and not perform? Like, not perform for the people, because really, most of those movements are just perform for the people, right? And then for you, I would say, yeah, just being able to find things that you're not doing, start doing those, and you'll find yourself already feeling better immediately. But one thing I'd say for most people, rotate more, rotate more, rotate more, rotate more. We're so linear. Lunge, squat, deadlift. It's all up here. Not much happening here. So hopefully that answers your question.
That's super.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was great.
Yeah.
I guess that's my goal, like getting a place with some land and just doing the farm life, or at least working towards the farm life, because
I love it.
I feel like I don't have to know as much. I can just, like you said, pull hay and just do things around the house.
Yeah.
And I don't really have to, like, I mean, I can still study nutrition. I don't have to become an expert in, movement patterns and all these things, right?
No. You really don't, man. Like, the only thing that I would implore you to take, even from this call, is the internal tension, like drawing your belly button up towards your lats and your obliques while you lift things or move things or even chop wood, and just play with it. I invite you to play with it and draw your own insights. I just know, actually, 100%, it's going to augment the way you work around the farm, and it'll be just enjoyable. Like, you're just going to be tossing things easy and chopping things easily, and it just feels very empowering to have that kind of control over your body, even in the most menial of tasks, I think, which are often the most important tasks. I'm actually a big fan of chopping wood, period, because I think it's just something that's innate in our bodies, and I'm not just pulling this out of my ass, but like something innate about chopping and hitting and throwing and climbing, hitting, throwing, chopping, throwing. Those are just very, like, human. That's just, it's implicit in our arms and our shoulders. So yeah, I love the fact that you have that kind of life. I would love to have that life eventually. That's something that I'm aspiring toward, to have all my clients online, all my athletes online, and just simply have that kind of life where I'm really just improving the longevity. Because right now, man, I'm in an apartment complex. There's freaking Wi-Fi everywhere. I'm in the heart of Austin, Texas, and it's noisy. There's Ubers. There's an ambulance that goes by every couple hours. And I'll be real with you, man. It's stressful. Like, I do my best to block out that stress with a lot of your advice, a lot of the things I've been reading. But even then, I feel it.
Yeah, no, that's admirable, and it took me years, and it does help a lot of these mitigation things. We need to get you a Blue Shield thing because that makes a huge difference. A little scalar.
I would love
that.
I would love that
when you're in the city. But yeah, that's cool. Hitting, throwing, chopping, climbing. That makes total sense. I've been foraging in the backwoods here and looking for chaga mushroom, and sometimes it's way up in the tree, and so you can actually buy. I guess these have been used for a while. Or climbing shoes, where they're like little spikes in the shoes, so you can kind of kick into the tree and climb up.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that.
But yeah, I need to work on my climbing, I'm sure.
Climbing is one of my favorite things, man. And have you ever watched Free Solo, that movie? The documentary Free Solo?
Oh, is that with the free climber guy, Alex something?
He's like climbing in Yosemite.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Bro.
I haven't seen it.
I highly implore you to watch it. I mean, other than it being just riveting, like, oh my God, this guy is climbing this freaking steep thing. It's just, at least when I watched it, I was like, yeah, I see myself doing that. It's a weird experience. Other than having mirror neurons and being like, yeah, I mirror what this person's doing. It's like something about my body really wanted to climb. And anyone that's been to a rock climbing gym, it is just one of the most fun freaking things to ever do. But yeah, no, I think rock climbing shoes are great. I think funny story, one time I was climbing here in Austin, Texas. There's a place in Fredericksburg, not too far out, the German town, not too far away. And this rock, you climb these trenches, and you have to basically scale the trench because there's a 50-foot drop. So your feet are on one rock face and your back's on the other rock face, and you have to just scale across to the other side. And I didn't have climbing shoes, and this is really dumb of me. Don't do this. But I didn't have climbing shoes, and me being 24 at the time was bullheaded and thought I could do it. And I went on there. I had these Vans on. Like, who climbs with Vans, right? Like, I'm climbing with Vans, and going across the rock face. And my friends have climbing shoes. They only made it to the other side, trying to get across. And there's one point where my right foot slips, and this is kind of like watching Free Solo, except he's way more impressive. Where you see this guy slip a few times, you're like, oh no, like you're about to fall. And there were several moments where I was just slipping. And I was ineffective because I didn't know much about movement at the time. I was just trying to use my arms with everything I have to hold myself up because my feet were slipping. And I almost fell down that trench. And I just had to keep bearing luckily I did so much powerlifting that my upper body was fairly strong. And I got over with mostly my arms. And then my friend grabbed me and took me out. But yeah, anyway, that's just a side story. I think climbing is one of the best things you can do for your body.
That's crazy. So is 50-foot drop if you were to fall?
Yeah. It's what people have claimed, like at least people I was with. It may have been more. I don't know what was down there, except darkness and death. But yeah, it was a pretty big drop, and it was a popular thing climbers are still doing. They do trench climbing, but they have better equipment. And what they do is they attach a rope to you to one side as you go across, so you're safe. But people like myself that were young and kind of frattish at the time wanted to show that I could do it, but it wasn't smart. Don't do that, guys.
People do all sorts of. Yeah, that's quite a story. Wow. Yeah, people do crazy stuff. Like one time I went hiking in Southern California. There's a place called Devil's Punch Bowl, and people have died there jumping off this waterfall, and the water was too low. But I remember walking down there, and there were people in flip flops and sandals, and this is it's like a 2-hour hike to get down to the little oasis area.
Oh
and
my
they're
God.
carrying 6-packs and they have their bathing suit on. We get down there, it's like a huge little college party. It's like we're just drinking and got the beer bong going, and it's crazy.
Dang, flip-flops. Yeah, no.
I would never hike in flip-flops.
Yeah, not a chance. Not a chance.
Earth runners maybe, but
yeah.
That's funny. One question I had for you, what are your thoughts on like the resistance band kind of thing? Because I interviewed John Jakish of the X3 bar.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them now, but he's a cool guy, and he seems genuine. Yeah. Yeah, he knew his stuff, and he had some interesting studies. And I guess the whole idea with the resistance bands is that you can push more than you normally could.
Yes.
And it's safer. You underload the joints, and you're overloading the muscles. It's kind of the basic idea in a nutshell.
Yeah, man.
Do you think that could have applications? Or
100%. I think what Dr. Jakish is doing is actually very smart. It is making people that like enjoy the lifting kind of like push and squat, like those kind of things. It's making them understand how to actually engage internally without even thinking about it, which is powerful. Now, my hope is that these people take that data internally and apply it to other things in life, because those bands are basically accommodating resistance. And accommodating resistance is the more you go into the band, it just gets more and more, it gets harder and harder. So it just resists you further and further the more you push that band to its extreme stretch, which is great, because then your body has to keep auto-correcting. With barbells and trap bar implements or stones or plates or dumbbells, they're often very fixed. So the resistance can just be one thing, and your body can figure out ways to compensate to move that fixed item. But with the band, what's so cool is that it keeps accommodating to your force. So the more you push to that band, the deeper it's stretching, the more it's like, ooh, I'm going to push back into you, because there's a resultant reverberating force that goes back with the band too. So that's what I love about it. It just forces your stabilizers to fire. It forces your midline to engage, because oftentimes when the resistance keeps getting higher, the more you push something, your core is like, it receives the information. It's like, what the hell? Why isn't this moving? And so then it starts to upregulate. And when it upregulates, it's great. And I think what he's doing is smart. My only qualm with it is if he can teach people to transfer that internal automatic thing that's already happening to other parts of their life. Because there are people that are not like Matt Blackburn or myself or Dr. John or Nadi or even a typical athlete that may go into the band training and then almost use it as a crutch. However, if you can understand the internal part really well and then take Dr. John's stuff, oh my God. I mean, there's so many applications to band work. I use bands in every single way and fashion. I put it around the body and make people rotate into it. I think it's one of the best freaking inventions out there. So I think
I love it. Yeah, I remember doing the one leg squat with it, like where you put it up, and that's really hard.
Oh my God.
Like, I was shaking a lot.
And that shake you mentioned is great. I mean, I want everyone, and this sounds crazy, but I want everyone to shake, because that's literally taking a flaccid muscle that didn't have enough blood flow, fluid integrity, and then filling it with this blood and being like, hey, come on, stabilize. And then it gets to a point where it's just filled up, literally filled up with juicy, like awesome fluid. It sounds very graphic, but juicy like fluid. And now it's a more stable muscle. It has more integrity, has better nutrient quality going towards it, and of course, better recovery. So heck yeah, I think that's great, man. I think Dr. John's work is awesome. I just think, I think if he had it apply to more things, like kind of like what Nadi is doing, it can be even better. But I think, yeah, I think he's doing a lot of good for the world with that product, 100%.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that hydration, that juiciness you were talking about also applies to the vertebrae in the spine, right? And I have spinal decompression, and I have an inversion swing, and different things to help. And that's That's the same thing, right? A lot of people get dehydrated in their spine, and so it'll just degenerate, and they're compressing it with deadlifts and
Oh my God, yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, it definitely does a whole lot for your joints, especially your vertebrae. Which, I mean, it's funny too, Matt, if you look at everyone's MRI right now, if you're looking at your MRI, my MRI, everyone right now, even if you're asymptomatic, you probably have some degenerative stuff going on. Probably have something. And it's funny, like, there have been a lot of these pictures roaming around the internet, and I actually was seeing this when I was in my master's program in exercise science. We look at a normal, otherwise healthy individual, right, whatever their standards are, right, for that, and then you would look at, I laugh about that because I'm like, what does otherwise healthy really mean? But then you look at athletes, you look at a whole array of people, and you start seeing that even the asymptomatic folks, that you're seeing like degeneration in their shoulders, in their spinal disc, in their vertebrae, in their hip socket. Just because we're not symptomatic doesn't mean it's not happening. Which also ties to this next point is people often look at longevity, and they look at your work, look at my work, and I think it's a big shift in consciousness. People are shifting towards longevity more than ever, but they're trying to hack it, right? A lot of people are trying to hack it, but I think that people will look at that work and often miss the point. They're like, well, why should I even do it now? Well, if I feel okay, why should I do it now? It's like, dude, if you actually look at what's going on inside of your body, you'd be shocked. There are things going on that you can't see to the naked eye that are causing all sorts of problems. And your standard of having no symptoms, it's very different than maybe someone that is seeking to keep pursuing the sense and the state of thriving. Like, I bet if I spent like a week out with Matt in Idaho, I'd feel like a different human. Like right now, my normal okayness is the way I'm feeling right now, which is okay. But I can't imagine just a week in Idaho without noise pollution, without light pollution, eating out there, being around the fire, what that would do, right? Like,
I have to build my guest house now.
Yeah. Hell yeah. But anyway, yeah, I think it's just fascinating how
that's a good point.
How we can not know what's inside our bodies, and then when you look at it, you're like, oh my God, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that point. Yeah, that just because we're asymptomatic, it doesn't mean that we're healthy. And when I post pictures of like my Saunders home track lumbar spinal decompression device that's hooked to an air compressor, I always get messages, what's wrong with your back? Do you have back pain? It's like, no, I don't want to have problems. I don't want to have back pain. That's why I'm using it preemptively. And especially with back problems, it's like 1% or less of people are probably interested in prevention. It's like 99%. It's like, oh, I have the pain already, right? What do I do?
It's like, oh crap, I gotta go to the ER now. No, yeah. I agree with you, man. I think it's the prevention side. Like, hey man, I just want to feel good when I'm 90, 120, 150, 100, whatever, right? Yeah. Yep.
Well, let's jump into the Q&A because we have a couple questions. I'm sure we'll go in some rants and so.
Sure. Go for it.
The first one we've already kind of touched on. What's your opinion on the Weck method and then the lumped in functional patterns? Those are kind of different. I've never heard
Weck.
I don't know if I've heard of the Weck method.
Man, the Weck method is really cool. I think they've figured out some pretty cool stuff too. What Weck has found out is basically what Nadi is doing. Nadi is just doing it at a different level, different layer, and Weck's doing it a different layer. So what Weck has figured out is the same kind of thought process of kinetic chains and functional lines. And what they're like, hey, why don't we isometrically hold muscles that are along the same line? Can we get our lat, oblique, glute, and hamstring to all fire at the same time? Boom. So they'll hold these like shapes for a long time, do push-ups like this, do pull-ups like this, and these weird side angles. And it's smart because now they're training the lines to do the job. So when people get out of the movement, they didn't have to stretch. They've already trained the lines, and now they're mechanically stable to a bigger range of motion. So technically, they are more mobile and flexible without having to ever stretch in your traditional way of stretching, which is holding a joint and hoping for the best, right? Like hopefully by the end of this, I feel good. But with something like Weck, with Weck method is like you engage into positions that are specific to where the body is designed. You have a front line, you have a deep line that goes from your pelvic floor all the way to your neck. You have lines that go through your arm. So many different ones. It's fascinating, man. And what Weck's done really well is they teach you ways to engage specific lines in isometrics and then teach you how to dynamically apply it to movement. Now, that's the main crux of Weck. Nadi's work is fairly similar. Like he'll put you in these what you call isomaps, where you hold a position for a long time with either a cable or a band or some other implement or even a ball, or he'll wrap a band around your body and he'll basically traction a specific line with a band around your body while your kinetic chain is being tractioned, which is decompression basically. While it's being tractioned, then he'll ask you to move an implement like a medicine ball or a cable. What's so great about that is that now when he's tractioning that line, he's giving a chance for the subset of muscles that are connected within the line to communicate with each other. And when you add the load, the cable and the ball, now that communication can happen way smoother because you're adding that traction at the same time. So that's pretty badass. Like, because your homie Kelly Starrett, who started with like the soft tissue balls and the band stretches, he was onto something too. He was like, traction works, myofascial work works, and working upstream and downstream from the joints work. He was on to something powerful, and people started getting better. Weck and Nadi are taking that and synthesizing it deeper and being like, well, how can we apply this and make three things happen at the same time? Traction, movement, integrity, blood flow, all in one. And that's basically what they've done. They're just synthesizing better and better and better. So they both have positive things. I'm actually just finding more ways to synthesize more of the work. So I'm like, can we add myofascial release in a position now, which I don't see very often. So I put people in a banded traction position with their arm back behind them, the band's pulling them. I have them rotate at the same time using their midline. And as they're rotating, I am myofascially going there and releasing. So I'm allowing them to get what they need, which is that line. They're engaging, they're opening, and they're also getting the myofascial benefit. So I'm just finding more and more ways to synthesize more and more things together. But I think the Weck and Nadi are they're onto something very positive, man. Hopefully that was
that's insightful. Cool. Yeah, the guy just that was great. I just interviewed my friend Nathan, and he was really into trigger pointing.
Yeah.
So we went pretty deep into that, and just with like a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball, saying just find a point that hurts and just roll over it and then just stay there. And I haven't delved into that as deeply as I should have. I've messed around, but mostly just with those tools, the Hypervolt, the rapid release, and different things which work. I'm kind of obsessed with the rapid release technology. That thing does really work. I mean, I've really melted some tension in my neck from that.
Yeah, man. I think myofascial work is powerful. I think the more ways we can combine it with movement, the more effective. But yeah, trigger pointing. I think trigger pointing.
That's awesome. And
go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I'll ask after.
I was going to say that the trigger pointing is fascinating because for those of you that are watching, and if you watch the episode with trigger points, what's fascinating about trigger points to me is what they signal when I'm watching someone move. What they signal to me is that something along the chain is off. Is simply what it signals to me. Because a trigger point, even if you listen to the last podcast, it sends referred sensations in different parts of the body. When you're hitting something here, you might feel a release up here. Something in your pec might release something in your neck. And that, again, alludes to the chain. So when I think of that, I'm like, well, how might I put this person in a shape that engages that chain and then I myofascially release? And or how can people even use lacrosse balls, but get into certain positions and shapes, just kind of freestyle even. Like put your hand behind your back, turn your neck, dig the ball into your pec. How can you freestyle a little bit and find, oh, weird. Like when I do that, my whole lat fires and engages the more I dig into my pec. My neck begins to drop. Oh, interesting. My jaw begins to drop. What if I actually open my mouth a little bit? Oh, that feels kind of nice. You begin to become intuitive about it. So yeah, I think trigger pointing also has its benefit. But I implore everyone that's watching, keep finding ways to synthesize things together and definitely get the benefit of the isolation work. Like first get used to just massaging, get first used to stretching, but then begin to synthesize, because when you synthesize, then you actually honor how the body is actually connected, which is very freaking complex. It's the way we talk about nutrition too. It's the same thing. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. What are your thoughts on like vibration tools? Because I know it's really easy to use on yourself,
Yes.
but from my experience, it hurts more and it's more effective when someone uses them on you because they don't know your pain threshold.
True.
And so they can just push the hypervolt or whatever it is. I've heard people say those are bad or EMFs or whatever, but I've definitely had some benefit from them.
I think percussion and vibration is something that's been around for a long time and been very powerful and used in several scenarios. So I'd say even for people that have movement disorders, for example, people that have even cystic fibrosis, people that have movement disorders where they don't know how to use their muscles, they have loss of motor control, percussion and vibratory sense is so beautiful and powerful because it sends a wave that gets to layers that are far deeper than just a myofascial push well. And bones, tissue, sinew, tendons, ligaments, they're very responsive to that kind of like, because even sound, like when you hear a sound, what does your body do? Like it has a reaction to it. Oftentimes, like very loud sounds can invoke some weird, like, oh, what is that? Like, you move this way. Or some very soothing sounds can invoke, oh, right? So percussion, vibratory work, I think is very powerful. I think the hyperice, the hypervolt stuff is mostly very good. I don't really have much bad to say about it. I use it sometimes with clients, but some clients find it kind of weird. They prefer moving and then having something done to them just because they've had the experience of that versus the hypervolt. I think the hyperice and hypervolt are still very beneficial. Like I would love people just to sit there while watching something or hanging out after a meal and just vibrating into their calf or going into their arch of the foot or going into the inner groin first. Like work on your root stuff and then work into your neck and your pec after. But yeah, I think it's a powerful tool. Percussion and vibration has an impact on people that have pathology, but also have a very, very big impact on people that are even asymptomatic and just need to be preventative.
That's awesome. Yeah, my thing is getting over the laughter. Like my girlfriend sits on me, like my thigh is just uncontrollable laughter. Like I can't stop,
Yeah.
and I don't know why. Maybe I should just try to let all that out and get to the other side. I don't know.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. So laughter and yawning are very common reactions to myofascial work. Yawning is very interesting in itself because if you look at the nervous system, you study some neuroscience as well, they talk about how the nervous system regulates stress and how it regulates the release of an emotion or stressful response. And yawning, laughing, and ticklishness when it comes to tissues are often a sign of a couple of things. And now this is, again, not fully proven. This is just information I've been reading, and I'm starting to play with an experiment myself. They're saying that if you're ticklish or you laugh or you yawn, typically you are releasing something, but also something about the tissue integrity is not quite fully supple or pliable. And because that's the case, the nervous system just finds ways to help you release it. Some people find laughter as an easy release. some people find yawning. Like I had a client, man, he yawned like over and over and over. The more his neck dropped, he was like, "Oh, I can't stop yawning, bro." And then at the end of it, he's like, "Man, I feel so good." And he's like, "I never yawned so much in my life." And then I had one girl that's so ticklish. If you read Thomas Meyer's book, he's like, ticklishness is often a sign of tissue not being very pliable because the fascia is so like this that even the simple little touch is kind of sensitive. It's like, don't do that. Like you might hurt me. And then you start like perceiving it as funny or too sensitive. So yeah, I'm still drawing my own theories and testing things about it. But so far, I'm finding people get less ticklish the more they do this kind of work, and they have less yawning, and they don't have that kind of like laughter response as much either. So I find that interesting. I don't know if it's directly related or it's correlational. I'm still testing it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fascinating area of study.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. So I wonder, because the rapid release uses more frequency than it does vibration. It's my understanding. So it's gentler. So maybe that's a good thing to start with in ticklish areas, and then work to the more vibratory stuff. So interesting. What's the best workout for peri-menopausal women?
That's a great question. Man, peri-menopausal women. Okay, so that's very tricky because there's so many layers to it. I'm actually training a woman that is perimenopausal. I've trained several women that are perimenopausal. I think it is a dangerous thought to immediately, like, kind of like there's a site called Testosterone Nation, T Nation, and they put out a bunch of articles on movement and training, and it can be quite alarming the way they talk about women's health. Kind of a little bit worrisome. But anyway, they talk about women's health as simple as, if you're perimenopausal, if you have thyroid issues, just need to lift weights. And it's so like simplistic. And in all honesty, just me being experimental, I've tried that. I was like, okay, let's just lift weights and try to clean up your carbs. Don't eat as much carbs, and eat some protein and have your vegetables, and it'll all sort itself out. But sometimes when you lift weights, if you think about lifting weights, the amount of metabolic demand that places on the body, the amount of CNS activation or upregulation that has to have for a person that's already processing so much metabolically and is having to really just maintain, can be dangerous. Like you could be harming that person. So number one, start cleaning up what you're eating, start cleaning up EMF, start cleaning up light pollution, start doing all the basics there first. Because doing too much movement in the beginning can be more stressful than it can be supportive. So that's is my recommendation. But I've seen this works really well with people. B, as you're doing that, begin to work first myofascial work, more mobility work, more active range of motion work, active isometrics, and then work slowly into some basic kinetic chains, and then begin to load yourself with some weight, bands, things of that nature. But I would be careful jumping into weight training. I would start with what you're eating, how you're breathing, how you're sleeping, basics. Start to incorporate myofascial work, band work, basic movement work, basic mobility, active isometrics, and then move into more intense kinetic chain work, so on and so forth. I think it's also silly to put people into HIIT training, high intensity interval training, if their body is fighting something that's far more demanding than anything else. If you add another demand that's stressful, what's going to happen? They're going to just keep feeling exhausted. So, yeah, that's my recommendation.
That was awesome. Yeah, that was awesome. My friend Josh Rubin, he always makes the point that people prioritize working out and weight loss before health. And oftentimes you have to get healthy before you add in a workout. And somebody's need to take a break from working out.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's an obsession, man.
Yeah, it's my understanding. Yeah, it's yeah. I feel like like people use it as a stress relief, right? But there's so many so many things you could do to stack for decreasing cortisol and adrenaline, like eating food, not intermittent fasting.
I think there's a lot of like self-image stuff that goes with what you just said about eating more. People are like, well, eating more, that's going to make me feel like a glutton, and A, B, C, D. It's just their views are so skewed about it. It's worrisome, man. From a mental health perspective, I'm just like, you are so obsessive about running right now. All you want to do is run yourself, because it almost seems to me like you're trying to run away from an emotion and trying to run away from something you're not facing. You just want to run and just get that endorphin release. And people often find that offensive, what I'm saying. But I'm just like, hey man, like your health doesn't really care about whether I sound offensive right now. I'm speaking just from what I see, and I know you keep doing this for the next 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. Not only are you going to have a really rough time with menopause and thyroid problems, you're going to probably have like far worse metabolic issues in your 60s and 70s. And the last thing I want is your quality of life to keep degrading. So yeah, man, I think people need to take a break more than especially women, because they're forced to believe that they need to be skinny and this and that, and they get so neurotic about it. And it's sad, but it's the way our society is a lot of the time.
Yeah, I fully agree. What do you think about icing injuries? You kind of talked about cold thermogenesis a little bit earlier, but icing injuries, do you ever use that with clients?
So they've again shifted a lot. Like as always, they've shifted. Like for a while, I was like always ice, rest, ice, compress, elevate, rice it. But man, like the more I study about movement and nutrition, the more it's showing me a different experience. Like people heal faster. I work with a lot of people that have injuries and that want to reclaim the way they move, or reclaim movements they've thought they've lost. So a lot of what TLF and TrainLifeFit in a nutshell is basically we help restore function first to the human body, so that you can learn how to biomechanically move well. So we teach you how to move well with the right internal augmentation, the right positioning, and you increase performance in the sports you love, or increase performance in your life. Or if you just want to live a life that's fruitful, full of experiences, and you want to be able to do it, be an able human, then that's what you get. Now, the thing is, with icing, what I've been finding is that restoring people back to function, that concept actually has been happening faster when we work more on warmth work. So more heating and blood flow and movement. More movement, the better, because at the end of the day, that's something you're trying to restore. But it's not just movement for the sake of movement. It is specific. Is it isometric? Is it rotational? What do you need at this moment in time? And that seems to be more effective. Now, do I think icing has a place? I think there's some moments it has a place, and I think it has more of a place in my mind if you have more things, if you have more of your ducks in a row, in terms of like what me and Matt talked about, in terms of your nutrition, you're protecting your body from too much stress. Because if you're already in a stress state and you have an injury on top of the stress you're already providing internally to your body, I think icing can be harmful in a lot of ways already. I think, and I truly believe, that clients will heal faster, human beings will heal faster when they can promote more blood that provides more nutrients to the site of injury. And the more that delivery can happen with a proper diet, the faster that site that's been damaged can heal. Even the vitamins and minerals that need to get to the spot, or even the immune cells that need to be mobilized to the lymph, can get to that site a lot better if we have those things in order. But if we add too much ice too soon in an already stressed state, I've seen clients actually take longer to recover. I got a guy back on the field, soccer game, because he needed to play. He was a star. He had an ankle injury, and usually say, "Oh, tape it up and cast it." And I was like, "No, man, we're not going to cast it. We're going to mobilize it slow. We're going to wrap and compress, and then take the wrap off. So we'll wrap him, compress him. While he's compressed, we'll move his joint rotationally, slowly load it on the stair. Start to apply it in a slow movement. And within like 3 or 4 days, the boy was back on the field, able to play a game. Now, should he have gone back on the field? Probably not. But when it comes to the sports world, they need players to perform. Like you need them to get back on the field. So we were able to get him back on the field, help his team win. The moment he got back off, we went right back to therapeutic work. And now it's kind of like him recovering. His next game's not for another 2 weeks. He's doing all his work diligently, eating correctly. And he's like, man, my ankle pain's gone down to about a 2 out of 10 when it was 10 out of 10 just only like 2 weeks ago. And most people will just keep icing and still have the same pain, but the icing makes them feel good in the moment. And the inflammation's down for a moment. But systemically, the lymphatic system is still like, there is a problem at the ankle. I must send more fluid here because I'm worried that this thing is not healed. So yeah, that's how I see it.
That's fascinating. I just I have this pulled up from Stanford. Human body temperature is decreased in the U.S. study finds, and they actually measured. So I thought it was interesting what you said about heat and warmth. Yeah. They measured 25,000 British patients, and their average temp was 97.9 from 98.6. So it's interesting, looking at the work of Dr. Raymond Peat, and everyone's getting colder, and now we're getting this intermittent fasting kind of propaganda just shoved down our throats. It's like hypothyroid, intermittent fasting, icing, cold thermogenesis. I have friends that believe we're heading into an ice age, not a global warming. So
interesting.
There's a lot of cold going on right now. It's interesting.
Yeah, like an internal global ice age.
Pretty much.
I see that, man. A lot of people I know are like, I'm always cold. I'm always cold. I'm like, dude, I don't have that issue. I am always warm. Or just not even like overheating, but sometimes I don't want to have that many covers on me. I'm like, I want it to be cold for a reason, and there's a reason for that too. But I want it to be cooler in my room so I can sleep. And sometimes with the girl I'm dating currently, she gets cold very often, and she's just shifted more into a pro-thyroid kind of way of living, and she can already tell things are changing. But like her extremities were just like freaking cold. And she'll touch me. I'm like, man, that's freaking cold. Like you gotta warn me. So
yeah, and I think we spoke about on the phone, like people think it's the thyroid, but their thyroid's usually producing thyroid hormone fine. People that are subclinical hypothyroidism, it's actually the liver, and the liver is screwed because it has no glycogen because we're starving ourselves. We're skipping breakfast. Not eating carbs and protein with every single meal, and so there's no glycogen, and it needs choline, and it needs vitamin E, fat soluble vitamins in general, but it's really a liver issue. People's liver is just trash, so they can't convert inactive T4 to active T3. And if the cells can't get T3, you can't throw logs on the fire, right?
That makes sense.
You can't actually burn your food efficiently to increase your body temperature. So yeah, that's interesting.
Wow, yeah, that's interesting.
That's funny. You might want to look into the chili pad too. They have I sleep on the Uller, I interviewed Tara, the inventor. That thing really works because you can go from 55 to 110.
Ooh.
And their new one, their Uller, you can program it. So it's and there's no EMFs. It's just water that goes through these tubes, but you can program it to like start cold and then wake you up with heat. It's kind of cool.
I see it right now. Okay, chili pad. Oh wow, you can change like different parts of the pad. You can have split.
Well, yeah, you can have it split. Yeah, depending on your partner, and then you could like set your bedtime to 10 p.m. and then
adjust it
60 Fahrenheit, and then whenever you wake up 6, 7, wake you up at 90 degrees or whatever.
Wow, that's cool. I like that.
It's kind of cool. Yeah, my bed's pretty crazy right now. I have like I should do a whole episode on it because it's pretty elaborate.
Yeah.
But Swiss dream bed with it's like a more affordable kind of Samina style, but I have that and the Magnetico, the 20 Gauss, and the Uller pads.
Oh wow, you got the whole 9. I like that.
And then a humidifier blowing through lodestone, so it's getting negatively charged.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Wait, a humidifier blowing through what stone again? Say that one more time.
It's magnetite. It's been struck by lightning, so it's a
Whoa.
lodestone, and yeah, the water droplets pass over them, and they put out a DC pulsed magnetic field you can measure with the Gauss meter.
Interesting.
And so supposedly Cleopatra slept on a bed of them, and people have used it to heal like arthritis and different conditions.
Interesting.
So
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. But let's see. Last question here. This is a good one. Yoga. What are the negatives associated with yoga and the dangers of yoga positions? Because yoga is trending right now, and I'm sure you see it. But in the big cities, there's like a yoga class every minute, right? Every block, just yoga. Everyone's into it, and
yeah,
it just seems like now he talks about being hyper flaccid. Like it can create that kind of a condition. People don't really understand what that means, but that's one of its issues, right?
Yeah, yoga is. I train actually a woman. Her name is Adrienne Mishler. A lot of people know her because she's globally known. She has like 6 million subscribers on YouTube. She's basically one of the biggest yoga advocates out there. But I train her, and she came to me because she was like, I've done yoga for a long time, and I've done bar class, and I've done Pilates and this and that, but I just don't feel strong in my body. I don't feel like, So I'm sitting there looking at this yogi, and I'm like, interesting. So this yogi is coming in, who talks a lot about the benefits of yoga, and there are a lot of positive benefits. I'm not going to just sit here and say that yoga is terrible, but a lot of positive benefits. But for a lot of people, it's contraindicated, and what I mean by that is the hyperflacidity issue is definitely a problem because people don't know how to augment the positions, like what we talked about with you a second ago, that you can make the axe swing way more contextually relevant towards you if you know how to internally augment it. But if you don't, which most people don't understand, and are hypercalcified and are hyper tight, then what's going to happen is people are going to force themselves into these bendy positions that hyperload parts of their bodies that just don't really need that right now. For a lot of women who typically in general I find that are more hypermobile and have more lax joints than men for several reasons, evolutionary reasons, but also other reasons as well. I think it can be more dangerous because if they're already hypermobile, they're making a joint more unstable. They're not really engaging properly into downward dog or upward dog or even boat pose or pigeon or whatever it is. They're just going to make their knees more unstable. Their patella starts to track really weird. And because of that, I think people end up hurting themselves because the more unstable a joint, the easier it is to dislocate, to pop out of socket, to pop, to click. All these pops that people try to adjust themselves with, even the obsession with popping, is one of the most dangerous things out there. I fully believe it. Like I had a guy that went to a chiro that dislocated his patella, and it's because he was already hyperflaccid. Someone pops him into place. There's no resultant stability coming out of that because the muscles haven't learned, the tissues haven't learned, the fascia have not learned. All they received was a quick adjustment. And oftentimes even yogis will get into positions like, oh, I just popped my neck, that felt great. Oh, I popped my back, that felt great. And that release feels good in the moment, but it often causes a whole slew of instability that's asymptomatic then and there, but becomes symptomatic at some point. Can yoga be effective? It can, if again you learn to internally augment, but most yoga poses are on your hands, on your shoulders. It's not super balanced. You don't have much pulling, mid-back activations, a lot of like neck and shoulder, because people don't know how to rotate this stuff down. People don't know how to integrate in that way. So the reasons against it, hyperflacidity, people that are hyperlax, already hypermobile, people that don't know how to internally augment their cues, and it can be an imbalanced practice for a lot of people. That's the big four negatives. The positives that it brings back, it brings back this notion of restorative, this idea of restorative, which I think is good. The concept is well-meaning. That certain positions, if I put my hip in external rotation, if I internally rotate, if I learn to, actively reach my shoulders away from my spine, I can create more length through my lats. Those ideas are great. The traction, the normal and natural traction that you're creating through the movement is awesome. However, I think it's just improperly taught. I think it's also improperly contextualized, and I think it's overused, quite frankly. Take Exhibit A, my client. She's just like, man, I do it too much, and it's not yielding me positive returns. What do I do with her? Nothing that looks like yoga. Everything we do with her is like band tension, rotation, single leg squats, Cossack squats, lateral squats. We do things that are on the gymnastics rings, where she's pulling, she's pushing, things that she doesn't normally do. More dynamic stability, where she's shaking a lot. She's like, I'm not used to this. I'm not used to my core being so on. I've loaded her very unilaterally. I've even had her lift a barbell with only weight on one side. All sorts of weird stuff because she's just not getting that otherwise. So yeah, those are my thoughts on yoga.
That's awesome. And when I was growing up, I cracked my knuckles a lot.
Yes.
Is that different? Because that's more the joints, but that's bad too. I would imagine that was the calcification component to that.
Yes, absolutely, man. I think Kelly Starrett has said this pretty well. I think this is becoming more commonplace in general after he said it. People before him even said it. Popping your joints, there's definitely a calcification component there. They're needing to pop for a reason. They've been maybe impinged in a way they're not supposed to. They just need some more traction. They need space. So yeah, in a way that can be detrimental. I think there is some popping that's just gonna happen and release. But the way the medical professionals put it out there, saying, "Oh, it's just release of air bubbles," I think it's too simplistic, and it's not taking into account the longevity approach. In the moment, contextually, it's like, oh, it's okay. It's not the worst thing in the world. You can die from heart disease. This is how they often think, right? Like, oh, heart disease is worse, so you're good. So they don't think about like what that thing can do to you compounded over millions of cycles. So
that's awesome. Well, yeah, I appreciate your time. This is great, and I definitely encourage people to head over to your website and check it out. And if you're in Austin, go by and check out his gym, TrainLifeFit. That's pretty awesome what you guys are doing in there. I definitely want to come by at some point.
I'd love to have you.
Yeah, I'm sure I have a lot of work to do.
We all do, man. I have too.
Yeah, I guess different areas, right? We have our strengths and weaknesses.
100%.
But I'm going to try to remember to chop wood on the other side, just not hit my leg.
Yes, just internally brace like a mofo. Draw that belly button up hard to your lats. You'll be safe. Yeah,
I love it. Awesome, Sumair. Well, thanks so much. Is there anything that we missed that you wanted to talk about, or I think we pretty much covered?
No, I think we
So I'll put the link to your website so they can.
Sure. Yeah. I think we covered a lot. I think we were able to make a lot of crossovers in nutrition, and that was my big thing. The more I went deeper into functional movement, the more I was like, we need functional nutrition, functional work inside too. So I was glad to make this synergy happen. But yeah, website, trainlifefit.com, Instagram at TrainLifeFit. You can even follow me at Sumair Bhasin, Sumair, and then Bhasin, and post lots of content on there. But yeah, happy to have a conversation with you. Even if you want to talk from an online capacity, we train people all around the world internationally as well. A lot of online remote training. I do want to get to where Matt is, where I can be in Idaho and train people online.
Get your chicken coop going.
Heck yeah. But
I love it. Awesome, Sumair. Well, thanks so much for your time, and stick around while I close out the show.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, that's a wrap for today's show. What do you think of that? Cadaver course. I can't imagine taking a course like that. That's pretty hands-on if you want to really figure out the human body and what's going on. I'm sure you would see a lot of calcification, lipofuscin, and fibrosis, as all three of those things are very visible in the human body, and especially in elderly people. And I just love how balanced Sumair is, asking him about X3 and resistance bands and how he's kind of open to all of it. I think that's really cool, and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of all the different modalities, because I don't think that's talked about enough. But what I do see is a lot of people going to 24-hour fitness or Gold's Gym, as I mentioned, like I did for years in the interview, and just really hurting their body, even if it's not visible on the outside and it looks like they're getting healthier and more vital. What good is it if you look good on the outside if you're getting wrecked on the inside? And these people in gyms, all the fitness studios, they're getting blasted with artificial blue wavelength light, which do have an effect on the bones. And then you stack that with Wi-Fi, which decrease bone density, the non-native electromagnetic fields that actually decrease the strength of your bones, and you stack that with artificial light, and these really have a powerful effect on the body, just light and magnetism. And then maybe that person's drinking water out of a plastic bottle that might say spring water on it, and they don't know that Fiji water and all of these are just bottled, filtered water, right? It's not artesian well water or spring water or whatever they claim. And more importantly, it's actually hard water. And so a lot of people in these gyms are drinking water that's loaded full of sulfuric acid, nitric acid, iron, and inorganic calcium, which accumulate in the body. Not the acids, those have an immediate breakdown effect, but the latter two, those accumulate in the body, and they'll synergize with things like algae oil or fish oil or krill oil, the omega-3s, and create lipofuscin. And so I think people in gyms are generally doing more harm than good. I like my friend Justin of Extreme Health Radio because he works out in the sunlight. He works out barefoot and outside, or if he's in his garage, he'll open the garage door. I think that's awesome. I think more people should be doing that. And if you can't, for whatever reason, because of your work schedule, just invest in a red light like the Gemba Red. I've had Andrew Latour on my podcast. Get a red LED setup. And if you're working out at night, do not work out under artificial full spectrum light. It's so bad for your health, especially at night. But if you work out with red light, that's a totally different story. You can light up a whole garage or your workout room or your bedroom, whatever, with something like the Gemba Red Groove, like I have on right now for every podcast. I shine that towards me. And that's a great way to add beneficial frequencies into the room. And I mean, this is measurable stuff. It's not airy-fairy stuff. So all of these things matter. And I think it's really important to take into account all of it. I like when Sumair said that movement is heavily tied to your lymphatic system, because I know a lot of people, especially in the detox, fruitarian, vegan world, that are obsessed with the lymphatic system. So they're just like, keep that crystal clear, fruit, rebounding on a mini trampoline, which I did for years. And it felt good, aerobic exercise, but now I question, with polyunsaturated fats stored in the tissue and prolonged aerobic exercise liberating free fatty acids from your adipose tissue, and when those oxidize, especially when you have a lot of iron in your body or endotoxin, and you have a lot of lipid peroxidation, which is most people, is aerobic exercise beneficial? I would highly question that. I think that more short-term burst kind of exercise is much healthier and less stressful on the body, especially in the context of all of these things that we've. So check out Sumair on Instagram, TrainLifeFit. What they're doing over there is awesome. Check out the website, TrainLifeFit. I'll put the links below. Sumair's just an awesome guy, and if you're in the Austin area, definitely stop by his gym. I think you'll get a lot out of it. As always, if you want to support my work and the show, you can head over to matt-blackburn.com. That's all of my recommended products there with discounts. And I update those regularly. I just put a really interesting product up there called Blue Canatine. I highly recommend, if you didn't listen to my Georgi Dinkoff episode, it was my second interview with him on nicotine, cannabis, or tobacco, cannabis, and alcohol. And those three substances are used quite heavily in the quote-unquote civilized world. And I think they are much less destructive than psychotropic, psychedelic, quote-unquote plant medicines, personally. And I could debate someone for hours on that topic. And there's definitely context that goes into that. I know alcoholics exist. I know people abuse those three things, tobacco, cannabis, and alcohol. But I think there are beneficial aspects to it, like North American Urban Spice has some good hemp products that just use the stalk alone. There's no psychoactive effect at all. It's not CBD. It's completely different from CBD. And this Canatine product is pretty cool because it contains methylene blue in a little tablet that you leave in your mouth. So it's methylene blue, hemp crystals, nicotine, caffeine, and this really interesting nootropic substance called methylene blue, which I've played with in the past. It's used actually to clean fish tanks from infections, but there's tons of studies on it, specifically human studies showing its benefits. And on their website, Transcriptions, they actually have the studies linked there directly, so you can read them. Methylene blue is something that I feel it works well with light therapy, especially red light therapy, going out in the sun. And if you took vitamin E, like my Mitolife PUFA Protect product, that would be an awesome synergy. So methylene blue is what's called a photosensitizer. So it actually makes your cells more sensitive to light, which is a good thing if you're exposed to the right frequencies of light and you're protected from the oxidation of PUFAs that are in your tissues. And so it's not just about ingesting a rancid oil that doesn't make any difference, as I've talked about many times. You can ingest the perfectly Myron glass, kept in the cold, kept in the fridge, perfectly preserved oil. It doesn't matter if they're rancid or not. Rancid or not, it's going in your body, a tropical 98.6 degree Fahrenheit body. You're going to have lipid peroxidation because you have iron overload, because the whole planet has a smoke ring around it, and excess iron is being liberated from the earth in unnaturally high amounts. That's really the key right there. And when you combine PUFAs with iron, you get this really scary substance called lipofuscin, which cakes up the lysosomes of your cell, and you can't perform autophagy. So you literally can't get any benefits from intermittent fasting, let alone sleeping for 8 hours a night, because that's the natural time to fast. We don't have to force the body into fasting. God designed it so that when we go to bed, that's our fast. We don't need to force a fast or skip breakfast or skip meals. That's insane. That is not in alignment with human physiology or with God's design. The liver stores glycogen for a reason. The liver uses glycogen to convert inactive thyroid T4 to active thyroid hormone, which is T3, to power all of the trillions of cells in your entire body. So this is a delicate symphony, and water, light, magnetism, they definitely play a role. Carbohydrates also play a role. Those are essential nutrients. Sugar is essential for sure, and animal protein is essential. Your body can make saturated fat, so that's probably the least essential, But saturated fat is very stable, and it will displace the highly unsaturated fatty acids that are stored in your tissues. So it's kind of like an oil change thing. I've been hitting the steaks pretty hard. I'll do a solo show pretty soon here talking about like what I eat in a day or what I've been doing lately. Feels really great, and it's been working for me, and it's very balanced. So anyway, tangent there, but that product, Transcriptions blue carnitine, is really fun. And I would say it's nice if you travel, or it's nice if you're using light therapy. And of course, if you have the foundation down, then it's going to work even better. And you could save 10% with the discount code Blackburn on that one. So check out that on my website, matt-blackburn.com. I believe it's on the second page. You have to click shop and then go to the second page. And all of my Mitolife products are at mitolife.co. I have 3 enzyme products right now: a systemic, a digestive, a gluten digesting enzyme. I have Shilajit, and I have a vitamin E. And updates to come. I'm upgrading some products, coming out with some new products, so I will announce that as soon as it happens. If you want to have your finger on the pulse of what I'm doing, definitely follow me on Facebook and Instagram, Matt Blackburn on both. You can find me on there. Today's quote is by Thomas Myers. Fascia is the biological fabric that holds us together, the connective tissue network. You are about 70 trillion cells, neurons, muscle cells, epithelia, all humming in relative harmony. Fascia is the 3D spider web of fibrous, gluey, and wet proteins that binds them all together in their proper placement. Our biomechanical regulatory system is highly complex and understudied, though new research is filling in the gap. Understanding fascia is essential to the dance between stability and movement, crucial in high performance, central in recovery from injury and disability, and ever present in our daily life, from our embryological beginnings to the last breath we take.